Today I want to make few modifications to my darkroom. I constantly need to close the window if I want to print something in the midday. Unfortunately, this is only one window which is not have like this classical German roulettes on top of the windows in my bathroom, and I want to put this type of a sunscreen on top. So this is not like general roulette, it's sun protective reflective roulette. So on one side it's silver, on the second side it's just black. This is crazy small investment, but it saves like literally minutes or even hours through the year when you need like tape and untape the things from the window. And as you can see, it's not transparent at all, so it's perfect for our application here. Unfortunately, instruction more or less looks horrible, and I cannot kind of find the proper solution, so I just construct it by eye, and this is how it goes on the window. So we don't need any type of drilling or things, so it's just two clamps which you hook up on the window and small like glue patches on top of the plastic parts. So from here I just can roll it down, and if this is like leaks on the sides I can just tape it additionally. Today we'll make one more print from Hamburg. It's quite interesting print because I'm not sure if I have an exposure correctly there, because it was really contrasty light and I want to expose for the shadows, but we will see how it goes. Let's heat the chemicals. So I set up circulator for 36 degrees as usual to keep up 35 degrees exactly inside the bottles. So in future I want to scan the final prints what I make in a darkroom and digitize it this way. So I don't really care about like scanning negative at this point. It's quite important to have a system in your negative, so I have only like date stamp system, so it's like sequential in time. But I don't really like this idea because you can navigate it only by memory. I have a good memory, like visual one, but it's getting not so easy because it's already like second folder what I have with the negatives. This frame is actually quite good in terms of sharpness and in terms of contrast here. Probably I will lose some things in the sky, but it was like bright sky and no clouds there. Let's start from focusing. On the Portrait 400 you almost cannot see any grain with the really good exposure, so you need to focus on the edges or some structures. Let's make initial calibration. So let's put this mist filter, put the calibrator hat, and try to dial up the calibration for each channel. As a first step, I actually finding the exposure, so I choose cyan channel and move the head to find the brightest spot. And from this point, I just switch to each channel, so yellow and magenta, and dial in the parameters on top of the head itself. Usually it takes a little bit of time. I think it's just accumulation of like integration of time here. And I land on around 15 seconds, so we will start from there. And this is good starting point. This is my initial settings. This is usual, nothing special here, but probably we will be a little bit off. So let's set up the 15 seconds on our timer and start with the test print and take a look what we actually have on exposure. Meanwhile, I will recheck the chemicals, mix them again, and take a look what the temperatures actually on the chemical bottle. So it's few degrees off, and I will wait 5 to 10 minutes more to get it stably on 35 degrees. I stopped pre-soaking the paper because it's removing exposure, so I don't really like the results, so I go straight forward for the dry paper to developer and make a test prints and all the prints like this. So from here you can see our exposure at least more or less correct, so I don't need to make like random first exposure tests. Let's analyze this test frame. So on the left side you can clearly see the magenta cast on the water, so it should be kind of a grayish bluish a little bit, so we for sure see magenta cast. And on the bricks on the wall and on the background there it should be more or less gray, so but it's magenta. And here we see partially the building there, so I don't really care about this part, but we can, you know, burn it a little bit. And I really like details here in the shadows, so it's more or less rendered. I don't see any like big problems with exposure, so we just need to correct the colors on the shot and continue with the corrections. It's also really important to put the initial settings what you have on the first test print in your lab book, because you can make different decisions, so you can be a little bit lost, and this is kind of a teaching problem here. I will discuss it like in the end of the video. Let's change the easel to the test printer and make a few tests in the magenta channel. So for this one we need to refocus again, and after refocusing I just go straight to the testing. It really saves the paper because you're using small stripe and you have 6 different exposures what you can put there. And as you can see here, I know I have too much magenta, so I move only in the positive directions from what I am standing at the moment. And the end of the strip, it's actually a little bit of kind of a greenish color. So you can clearly see the difference like in steps of 5 in this strip. And this is really easy to analyze and find the proper spot on your test strips here. So tape everything down to the lab book, and from there just put all the parameters what you actually have on top, and just choose the proper one what you like more by eye. Usually if you have this type of strips, it's much easier than like comparing 2 different ones, so 2 different prints with like random settings and so on. And the next test print I just changed the yellow channel because the print was a little bit yellowish. I need like small corrections, and here you also can see it goes more or less to the blue side, like blue-violet thing. So you can clearly see where is the like transition point, and where it's too much blue you can choose also the ideal point on your print here. And again, taping everything down to the lab book. I'm using this transparent scotch. You can actually remove everything from there if you need it in future, so this is quite handy. And don't forget, put all the settings what you have, like all the steps on top of the strip. So this was the yellow channel, so I will put the settings like from initial position to the position what I have on the head at the moment. From the settings I can see I'm actually really close to the end of my exposure head, and it means I have too much cyan channel, so at the moment it's 60, and I'm going up in both channels, so in magenta and the yellow channel. Because I like exposure, in principle for the whole frame I will just go back to the bigger prints with the same settings what I found, and check the focus on the opened aperture again, and slow down the aperture, and from there just make one big print, which actually can be our final print. Let's see how it looks like. This photo head actually have a removing filters switch kind of on top of the head, so you can remove all the filters from the optical path, and it's usually much easier to focus by hand if you have not enough exposure, especially for the big prints. Lately I prefer to work with the gloves, not mostly because of the safety, but just because your hand is always wet, and I just don't really like the wet hands. Let's start from the color developer. It's 45 seconds with the color developer, and after I press the timer I just flip the drum, and liquid from the cup inside the head of the drum is actually transferring inside the drum, and I rotate back and forward. So I have one rotation in the front directions and usually like one rotation in the back direction, or I just use a label on top of the drum as a sign, so I make 2 rotations, 3 rotations or something like this. It's not really principle. I never saw any deviations if I rotate only like one direction. Maybe sometimes with some processes it will have a little bit like more inconsistency in the development, but for my experience I have no problems with it. So let's wash our print and take a look what we have with the color and exposure there. Even if it's wet, it looks quite promising. I think you have a little bit of bluish tint in some places. It's just because it's not washed properly, and after you dry it, your exposure in colors is actually set. but even before you dry it completely, probably only exposure is actually different from like real print what you're looking at when it's dry. I don't have any problems with the sharpness. It was shot on a Hasselblad from hands, so it was about f8 and it was exposed on shadows here with a great contrast. And because it's a Portra 400, we can tell like easily. Here we still have a building there, but I don't really want to expose it. So, and this is our crop, what we actually set up for the test prints, and we can see it's the same kind of a colors there. And the rest of the picture looks more or less good. So I really like the right part, which is a more shadowless part, and the balance on the picture, it's quite good. So I don't want to reprint it. From test print it was not so obvious, but I actually moved yellow and magenta channel up to the 10 points, and it means I just need to decrease cyan channel. So it's not so obvious, but it's a learning curve of analyzing colors on the color photography here.